The golden sun hung low over the acacia trees of Elburgon, casting long, amber shadows across the dusty plains that stretched toward the horizon. In this corner of Kenya, where the air smelled of dry earth and blossoming jasmine, two institutions stood as pillars of the community, the Elburgon Academy of Excellence and the Rift Valley Science Institute. For many years, these schools had been locked in a rivalry so fierce it bordered on the legendary. It wasn't just about football or debating, it was about the annual Inter-County Science Fair, an event that promised the winner a full scholarship to the university in Nairobi and, perhaps more importantly, bragging rights that would last a generation. Amina, a brilliant student with eyes that reflected the sharp clarity of the highland sky, was the pride of Elburgon Academy. She was a tinkerer, a dreamer who spent her afternoons in a makeshift laboratory behind her father's hardware shop. Her hands were often stained with grease or copper dust, and her mind was a whirlwind of equations and structural diagrams. Her project for this year was ambitious, a low-cost, solar-powered water filtration system designed specifically for the nomadic communities of the north. She believed that science was not just a collection of facts in a textbook, but a tool for survival and dignity. Across town, Juma walked the halls of the Rift Valley Science Institute with a quiet, focused intensity. He was the son of a local meteorologist, and he possessed an uncanny ability to read the patterns of the wind and the soil. While Amina focused on the tangible mechanics of water, Juma was obsessed with the invisible potential of the air. His project involved a modular wind turbine crafted from recycled aircraft aluminum, capable of generating electricity even in the lightest of savannah breezes. Juma was driven by a deep-seated desire to lift his family out of the cycle of energy poverty that had plagued their village for years. The rivalry between the two schools was palpable. Students from Elburgon Academy wore navy blue blazers with silver trim, while those from Rift Valley donned forest green. When they met in the market or at the local library, glances were exchanged like parries in a fancy match. The teachers stoked the fire, reminding their pupils that the trophy belonged in their respective display cases. Precision is our heritage, Amina's physics teacher would say. Innovation is our future, Juma's principal would retort. The first time Amina and Juma truly noticed one another was 3 weeks before the fair. They both happened to be at the town's only public computer center, seeking technical data on kinetic energy conversion. The internet was slow, a common frustration in Elburgon, and as they waited for a page to load, their eyes met over the tops of their monitors. The wind speed averages for the northern corridor are higher than the national charts suggest, Juma said softly, breaking the silence. He had recognized the Elburgon Academy patch on Amina's bag. Amina blinked, surprised that a grin would speak to her. Only if you account for the seasonal thermal updrafts, she replied, her voice steady. If you're building a turbine, you have to factor in the dust storms. The grit will chew through your bearings in a month. Juma leaned back, a faint smile playing on his lips. I'm using sealed ceramic bearings. And I've added a centrifugal dust ejector. Amina felt a spark of genuine interest. That's clever. But where are you getting the torque for the filtration pump if the wind dies down at night? I'm not pumping water, Juma said. I'm storing energy in a gravity battery, lifting stones during the day to release power at night. For the next hour, the rivalry vanished. They weren't representatives of competing schools, they were two minds speaking the same language. They talked about gear ratios, photovoltaic efficiency, and the moral weight of their work. When the sun finally dipped below the horizon and the shopkeeper told them it was time to close, they walked out into the cool evening air, feeling a strange, new weight in their chests. As the days progressed, the pressure of the science fair intensified. Amina's classmates noticed her distraction. You're not losing your edge, are you? Her best friend, Sarah, asked. The Rift Valley boys are saying Juma's turbine is going to blow our projects away. Amina shook her head, trying to focus on her filtration coils. It's just a project, Sarah. We are all trying to solve the same problems. But it wasn't just a project. Amina found herself walking past the park where Juma often sat to sketch his designs. Sometimes they would talk for 10 minutes, sometimes for an hour. They shared stories of their childhoods, Amina's memories of the drought that killed her grandfather's cattle, and Juma's dreams of seeing the lights of Nairobi from a plane. In the quiet moments between technical jargon, a fragile, beautiful affection began to bloom. It was a love built on mutual respect and the shared thrill of discovery. However, the town of Elburgon was small, and secrets were hard to keep. A week before the fair, Amina was summoned to the principal's office. "I hear you've been spending time with the opposition," the principal said, his voice cold. "Juma is a talented boy, but he is the enemy this week. If you share our research, you are betraying your school." "We aren't sharing secrets, sir," Amina argued, her heart racing. "We are sharing ideas. Isn't that what science is supposed to be?" The principal didn't listen. He forbade her from seeing Juma until after the fair. On the other side of town, Juma faced a similar ultimatum from his coach. The rivalry had become a war, and for the first time, the ambition that had always driven them felt like a cage. The day of the fair arrived with a heat that shimmered off the asphalt. The town hall was packed with parents, officials, and nervous students. The Elburgon Academy booths were a sea of blue, while the Rift Valley tables were a forest of green. Amina stood by her water filtration system, her heart heavy. She looked across the room and saw Juma. He looked tired, his green blazer slightly rumpled, but when he saw her, he gave a small, barely perceptible nod. The judging was rigorous. The officials moved from booth to booth, asking pointed questions and checking calculations. Amina performed flawlessly, explaining the chemistry of her carbon filters and the physics of her solar trackers. Juma was equally impressive, his wind turbine spinning gracefully in the draft of an industrial fan, lighting up a small model village with a steady, warm glow. By mid-afternoon, the tension reached a breaking point. The head judge, a stern professor from the university, called for silence. "This year," he began, "the quality of innovation is unprecedented. We have seen two projects in particular that address the most pressing needs of our nation, water and energy." Amina held her breath. Sarah squeezed her hand. However, the judge continued, "We noticed something during the final reviews. Amina's filtration system requires a power source that is more consistent than the small solar panel she has used. And Juma's wind turbine produces excess energy that is currently being wasted once his battery is full." He paused, looking at the two students. If these two systems were integrated, if the turbine powered the filtration pump, the result would be a revolutionary, self-sustaining utility hub. But as individual entries, they are incomplete. The room fell silent. The rivalry had forced them to work in silos, and that isolation had limited their impact. The judges announced a tie for second place, awarding the grand scholarship to a student from a different county whose project, while less ambitious, was more complete. The disappointment was a physical weight in the room. The Elburgon students grumbled, and the Rift Valley team looked defeated. Amina felt a tear prick her, not because she had lost the scholarship, but because the war between her and Juma had cost them both something greater. As the crowd began to disperse, Amina didn't go to her teammates. She walked straight to Juma's booth. He was staring at his turbine, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "The judge was right," she said softly. Juma looked up. "I know. I was thinking about your pump the whole time I was designing the voltage regulator. I didn't think I was allowed to ask." "We let the rivalry win," Amina said, reaching out to touch the sleek aluminum blade of his turbine. "We let the colors of our blazers matter more than the work." Juma took a step toward her, ignoring the whispers of the students around them. "It doesn't have to stay that way. The fair is over, Amina. The scholarship is gone, but the problems we wanted to solve are still there." In the weeks that followed, the town of Elburgon witnessed something it had never seen before. A blue blazer and a green blazer were seen working together every afternoon in the workshop behind the hardware store. They weren't competing, they were collaborating. They spent their evenings refining the connection between the wind turbine and the water filters, laughing as they solved the problems that had tripped them up during the fair. Their parents, seeing the joy and the brilliance of their partnership, eventually let go of the old grudges. The town began to realize that the rivalry had been a shadow, preventing them from seeing the light that could be produced when two sides joined forces. On a warm evening, a month after the fair, Amina and Juma stood on a ridge overlooking the savannah. Below them, their completed prototype sat in the courtyard of a local clinic. The wind picked up, the turbine began to hum, and a steady stream of clean, life-giving water began to flow into the storage tanks. "We did it," Juma whispered, taking Amina's hand. "We did it because we waited," Amina replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We waited for the noise of the competition to die down so we could hear what our hearts were saying." Under the vast Kenyan sky, where the stars began to twinkle like distant sparks of a cosmic experiment, Amina and Juma understood a truth far deeper than any scientific law. They learned that ambition doesn't have to be a solitary climb, and that love is the most powerful catalyst for change. As the savannah breathed around them, they knew that their journey was just beginning, not as rivals, but as partners, proving that when hearts are patient, they can rise higher than any trophy, lighting up the world one discovery at a time. The legacy of their collaboration spread far beyond Elburgon. News of the Savannah hybrid reached the university in Nairobi, and the very judges who had passed them over for the scholarship invited them to present their work at a national conference. They arrived not as representatives of two warring schools, but as a unified front. They spoke of the importance of interdisciplinary cooperation and the dangers of intellectual tribalism. Their love story became a beacon for the younger students in their town. The following year, the Intercounty Science Fair was renamed the Elburgon Collaboration Summit. Students were encouraged to form teams across school lines, and the atmosphere of tension was replaced by one of shared purpose. Amina and Juma eventually went to the university together, supported by a private grant from an NGO that saw the potential in their hybrid system. They studied engineering and environmental science, their bond strengthening with every challenge they faced. They proved that the savannah was not just a place of survival, but a place of infinite possibility when people chose to look above the horizon of their own egos. Years later, when they returned to Elburgon as successful engineers to install a full-scale version of their system, they stood in the same park where they had once shared whispered secrets about gear ratios. The acacia trees were taller, and the town had grown, but the feeling in the air was the same, the feeling of a community that had learned to value heart over heat, and unity over pride. They looked at each other, the grease on their hands a familiar comfort, and realized that the greatest experiment they had ever conducted was the one involving their own lives. They had tested the limits of rivalry and found it wanting. They had tested the power of love and found it to be the only constant in an ever-changing world. And there, above the savannah, their hearts remained, steady and bright, forever intertwined in the beautiful, complex machinery of a life shared. If you enjoyed the story, learned something, and watched till the end, please do us a small favor by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It's a small favor from you, but it would really mean a lot to us. Also drop your thoughts in the comment section. I will be reading every one of them. Thanks for watching. Until next time, my friends.